The crystal glass felt cold in my hand, a stark contrast to the simmering resentment coiling in my stomach. "It's just a shame, isn't it?" Edith's voice, smooth as poisoned honey, cut through the clinking of silverware. "All this, and no little feet to fill the halls. My name is Taylor, and for the first 3 years of my marriage to Harlan, I genuinely believed I was happy. He was charming, attentive, the man I dreamed of. We'd laughed easily, built a comfortable life. Our apartment, before we moved into the orbit of his family, felt like a haven. Now it felt like a gilded cage, and the bars were closing in." Edith, Harlan's mother, sat at the head of the enormous mahogany table, a queen surveying her domain. Her eyes, the same cool blue as Harlan's, flicked towards me, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. "A strong family line needs continuation, wouldn't you agree, dear?" I forced a smile. "Of course, Edith." What else could I say? Alfred, Harlan's father, a man usually lost behind his financial papers, grunted in agreement. "Legacy, that's what matters, keeps the name alive." Harlan, seated beside me, shifted uncomfortably. He reached for my hand under the table, a small squeeze that was meant to be reassuring, but felt more like a plea for me to play along. "We're trying, Mum," he said, his voice a little too jovial. "These things take time." "Time, Harlan?" Edith raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "You're not getting any younger. And Taylor—" She let her gaze linger on me, a slow, deliberate assessment. "Well, a woman's prime is a fleeting thing." My cheeks burned. It wasn't the first time. The comments had started subtly, a year or so after the wedding. Little remarks about friends' grandchildren, about the importance of fulfilling wifely duties. I tried to talk to Harlan about it late at night when the house was quiet. "She doesn't mean anything by it, Tay," he'd say, stroking my hair. "You know how she is, traditional, just try to understand." But how could I understand the constant, gnawing implication that I was somehow lacking, that my worth was tied to my ability to produce an heir for their precious family? The Sunday dinners had become an exercise in endurance. The food was always exquisite, the wine expensive, the conversation stilted and punctuated by Edith's carefully aimed barbs. Sydney, Harlan's younger sister, who I once thought might be an ally with her more modern views, would often chime in with a smirk. "Some people just aren't cut out for the domestic arts, I suppose." Tonight the air felt particularly heavy. The roast beef sat like a stone in my stomach. I picked at my asparagus, avoiding Edith's gaze. "You know," Edith continued, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin, "my friend Beatrice, her granddaughter, just announced her third. Such a blessing. Beatrice is over the moon, says it keeps her young." "That's lovely for her," I managed, my voice tighter than I intended. Harlan cleared his throat. "More wine, anyone?" He was always quick to change the subject when things got too pointed, but he never, ever defended me. Not really, not in a way that mattered. Later that evening, after Alfred had retired to his study and Edith had gone to make her nightly round of calls, presumably to discuss the various failings of the younger generation, Harlan found me staring out the bedroom window. The city lights glittered below, a million lives unfolding, and I felt utterly alone. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Don't let her get to you," he murmured into my hair. I stiffened. "It's hard not to, Harlan. It's every week. It's constant." He sighed, a sound I was becoming far too familiar with. He turned me around to face him, his expression earnest, almost pleading. "Look, Taylor," he began, and my heart sank. I knew that tone. It was the precursor to him asking me to concede, to understand, to be the bigger person. "What, Harlan?" He hesitated, then his gaze firmed, echoing his mother's resolve. "Maybe Mom's right, Taylor." My breath caught. "We should be trying harder. The family expects it." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. It wasn't just his mother's opinion anymore. It was his. He was siding with them. The first crack in the foundation of our marriage had just become a fissure. And in that moment, looking at the man I loved, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The silence in our bedroom after Harland's words was deafening. "The family expects it," he'd said, not "I want this with you," or "let's figure this out together," just "the family expects it." I pulled away from him, a cold knot forming in my chest. "And what do you expect, Harlan?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking stressed. "I expect us to be a family, Taylor, a proper family. Isn't that what you want too?" "A proper family doesn't involve my husband telling me his mother is right to constantly belittle me," I said, my voice trembling slightly. He didn't answer, just sighed again and started getting ready for bed, as if the conversation was over, as if my feelings were a minor inconvenience. The following weeks were a blur of forced smiles and thinly veiled criticisms. The pressure didn't just mount, it became a suffocating blanket. The breaking point came at Alfred's 60th birthday party. The house was filled with their friends, people who had known Harland since he was a boy, people who looked at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity. Edith was holding court, naturally. She'd just finished a story about a business acquaintance whose son had finally provided him with twin grandsons. She beamed, then her gaze landed on me, standing awkwardly near the canapes. "It just goes to show," she announced, her voice carrying across the sudden lull in conversation, "what a joy it is when a family is complete." She paused, letting the word hang in the air, before her eyes met mine directly. "Some, of course, remain incomplete, a sad state of affairs, really." The chatter around us died. Every eye in that section of the room turned to me. My face felt like it was on fire. I could feel Harland stiffen beside me, but he said nothing. Absolutely nothing. He just stared straight ahead, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Then Sydney, ever her mother's echo, piped up from across the room, a champagne flute in her hand. "Well, some women just don't understand their primary purpose, do they, Mother?" she said, with a light, dismissive laugh, as if it were the most amusing observation. Alfred, the birthday boy, simply nodded in agreement with his wife, a grim set to his mouth. A man needs heirs. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. "Incomplete," the word echoed in my ears. I looked at Harlan, a desperate plea in my eyes. "Defend me. Say something. Anything." He met my gaze for a fleeting second, then looked away, down at his shoes, as if they held the answers to the universe. The silence from him was louder than any insult. I mumbled an excuse about needing some air and practically fled to the garden, my heart hammering against my ribs. The cool night air did little to quell the burning shame and fury. They weren't just whispering anymore. They were shouting it from the rooftops, in front of everyone. And my husband, my partner, stood by and let them. Later that night, curled up in bed, feigning sleep as Harland snored softly beside me, the tears finally came. Hot, angry tears. But beneath the devastation, something else flickered, a tiny, stubborn spark. If I was incomplete in their eyes, if my sole purpose was to be a vessel for their legacy, then to hell with them. To hell with all of them. I wiped my eyes, reached for my laptop and dimmed the screen. The words "online business ventures," "starting a company from scratch," "female entrepreneurs" filled the search bar. I didn't know what I was looking for, not really. An escape? A shield? A way to prove I was more than just a barren wife, maybe all of it. The seed of an idea, desperate and fragile, began to form. If they thought I was nothing without their name, without their approval, I would show them. A few days later, the house was quiet. Harlan was at work, Alfred too. Edith was supposedly at a charity luncheon. I was tidying up the living room, the silence a welcome respite, when I heard Edith's voice drifting from the study. She must have come back early. The door was slightly ajar. "Yes, Beatrice, absolutely. Fertility is paramount, of course. We can't afford another misstep." A pause. "She's a lovely girl, from a good family, and her mother assures me she's very keen on starting a family right away. The Price legacy, you understand, it needs to be secured." My blood ran cold. She wasn't talking about a new employee for their dusty old manufacturing company. She was talking about Harland's next wife. The implication was chillingly, horrifyingly clear. They weren't just insulting me anymore. They were actively planning to replace me. My hand flew to my mouth, stifling a gasp. I stood frozen, the dustcloth falling from my numb fingers. Edith's voice continued, calm and businesslike, as if she were discussing a corporate merger rather than the dismantling of my life. Harlon is agreeable, of course. He understands his duty. The girl, Scarlett, is meeting us next week for an informal tea, just to get acquainted. Scarlett. They even had a name. And Taylor? Beatrice's voice, tinny through the phone, was audible now. How will you manage that? Oh, that will be handled delicately but firmly, Edith replied, a dismissive wave in her tone. A quiet annulment, perhaps, on grounds of... well, her inability to fulfill the marriage contract. We'll ensure she's comfortable, of course. A small settlement. It's for the best, for everyone involved, especially for the future of the family. My legs felt like lead. I backed away slowly, silently, retreating up the stairs before they could hear me. In my room, I sank onto the edge of the bed, the world tilting. Annulment, inability to fulfill, a small settlement. They were discussing me like a faulty appliance to be discarded and replaced. The pain was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest. But beneath it, something new was stirring, a cold, hard fury. The kind that doesn't scream but meticulously plans. That afternoon, Harland came home, all smiles, suggesting we go out for dinner. Just the two of us, he said, kissing my cheek, like old times. I looked at him, really looked at him. Did he know the details of their conversation? Did he know they were already picking out my replacement? His cheerful ignorance, or perhaps his complicity, was a fresh stab to the heart. I have a bit of a headache, Harlon, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Maybe another time. He looked disappointed but didn't press. All right, early night then. Later I heard them downstairs, Edith, Alfred and Harlon. Their voices were muffled, but the tone was serious. A family strategy meeting, Edith had called it earlier. Probably about their struggling, old-fashioned manufacturing business, a relic of a bygone era that Alfred clung to with stubborn pride. But I knew, with chilling certainty, that I was also on their agenda. I crept to the top of the stairs, my heart pounding. "The financials aren't improving, Father," Harlon was saying. "We need a significant shift or we're in real trouble." "And we need an heir, Harlon," Edith cut in, her voice sharp. "That is the most significant shift we need. This situation with Taylor, it's untenable. It reflects poorly on us, on the family name. People talk." "I know, Mother, I know," Harlan sounded weary. "But these things are delicate." "Delicate?" Alfred scoffed. "The only thing delicate here is our future if we don't act decisively. This Scarlett girl sounds promising. Solid family, good breeding. We need to move forward." "We'll arrange a dinner," Edith declared. "All of us. So Scarlett can see what she's marrying into. And Harlan, you need to start distancing yourself from Taylor. Make the transition smoother." I couldn't listen any more. Soul-crushed didn't even begin to cover it. I retreated to the bedroom, the betrayal a bitter taste in my mouth. They weren't just cruel, they were calculating. And Harlan, my husband, was a willing participant in my erasure. The tears I'd shed before were tears of hurt. These were tears of rage. I picked up my phone, my fingers flying across the screen. "Ava, are you free to talk?" Ava, my best friend since college, my rock, answered on the second ring. "Taylor, what's wrong? You sound awful." The words tumbled out, the insults, the whispers, the overheard conversation. Scarlett. I told her everything, the dam of my composure finally breaking. Ava listened patiently, her horrified gasps and furious interjections a balm to my raw nerves. That absolute witch," Ava seethed when I finished. "And Harlan, I swear, Taylor, I could throttle him." "They're planning to get rid of me, Ava," I whispered, "like I'm nothing." "You are not nothing, Taylor," Ava said fiercely. "You are brilliant and kind, and you deserve so much better than those vipers. What are you going to do?" A strange calm settled over me. The pain was still there, a dull ache, but the fury had solidified into something else, resolve. I'm going to build something, I said, the idea that had been a fragile seed now taking root. Something they can't touch, something that makes me, not just Harland's wife. That night, with Harland sleeping soundly beside me, oblivious to the storm raging within me, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop. The faint glow illuminated my face as I began to type. Business plans, market research, competitor analysis. My fingers flew across the keyboard, outlining a disruptive tech company. An idea that had been percolating in the back of my mind for months, born out of frustration with outdated systems I'd encountered in my previous, pre-Harlan career. The hours passed. The first hint of dawn was painting the sky when I finally leaned back, a grim satisfaction settling in. It was ambitious. It was terrifying. But it was mine. Before I closed the laptop, I did one last thing. I navigated to a business registration website, company name Phoenix Innovations. A small, bitter smile touched my lips. Let them plan their future with Scarlett. I was planning mine, and I would rise from the ashes of this sham of a marriage, stronger than they could ever imagine. Little did they know, their incomplete tailor was about to build an empire. The next few months were a carefully constructed charade. At home, I was Taylor, the subdued wife, the one who offered quiet, non-committal answers to Edith's increasingly pointed questions about my plans. I'd plead headaches, fatigue, anything to avoid prolonged interaction, to carve out a few precious hours for my real life. My real life was lived in hushed phone calls to Ava, who became my silent partner in spirit, and late nights hunched over my laptop in the spare room I'd unofficially claimed as my reading nook. I cashed out the modest savings I'd brought into the marriage, every penny I'd earned before becoming Mrs. Harlan. Ava, bless her loyal heart, co-signed a small personal loan, her faith in me unwavering. "You've got this, T," she'd said, squeezing my hand. "Show them what you're made of." With that seed money, I hired a freelance developer, a young, hungry coder I found online. We worked remotely, building the prototype for my software, a streamlined logistics platform designed to undercut the clunky, inefficient systems used by companies like Alfred's. The Price family, meanwhile, continued their not-so-subtle search. "We're interviewing for a new position at the family foundation," Edith announced one Sunday, her gaze sweeping over me. "Someone young, energetic, with fresh ideas. Someone who understands the importance of legacy." "Oh?" I asked, feigning mild interest, stirring my tea. "What kind of role is it?" "More of a guiding role," Alfred interjected, puffing out his chest. "Someone to help us look towards the future." Harlan fidgeted, avoiding my eyes. "Yes, well, it's very important work." I knew Scarlett was making the rounds. I'd seen unfamiliar, expensive-looking cars parked outside the house on afternoons I was supposedly out running errands. Errands that usually involved clandestine meetings in coffee shops with my developer or hours spent in the library, devouring business journals. There were close calls. One evening, Harlan came home early, finding me with spreadsheets open on my laptop instead of the novel I claimed to be engrossed in. "What's all this, Tay?" he'd asked, peering over my shoulder. "Oh, just helping Ava with a little project for her work," I'd said, my heart hammering, quickly closing the files. Boring stuff. He'd accepted it easily enough. He never did pay much attention to my interests beyond how they reflected on him or the family. Another time, Edith made a surprise visit midweek. "Just to see how you were feeling, dear. You've seemed so peaky." I'd managed to shove my notebooks under the sofa cushions just seconds before she walked in, offering her a weak smile and a cup of herbal tea. The biggest step was finding an investor. My prototype was promising, but to scale it, to truly make an impact, I needed capital. Ava had a contact, a friend of a friend, Raphael Meyer. He was a legend in the local tech scene, a notoriously skeptical angel investor. Our first meeting was in his sleek, minimalist office. He listened, poker-faced, as I laid out my vision for Phoenix Innovations, my voice more confident than I felt. "Ah, ambitious," he said when I finished, steepling his fingers. "The logistics sector is a dinosaur graveyard. What makes you think you can succeed where others have failed?" "Because they're approaching it with old thinking," I countered, leaning forward. "My platform is leaner, faster, more adaptable. It leverages real-time data in a way their legacy systems can't even comprehend. I know this market, Mr. Meyer. I know its pain points." He grilled me for an hour on my financials, my marketing strategy, my team, which was essentially me and a freelancer. I answered every question, fueled by adrenaline and the memory of Edith's condescending smiles. He was silent for a long moment, studying me. "You've got fire, I'll give you that," he finally said. "And the idea? It has teeth." He paused. "I'm intrigued. Let me see a full demonstration next week, and bring your detailed 5-year projection." The following week, I gave the pitch of my life. I walked him through every facet of the platform, showcased its potential, and laid out my aggressive growth strategy. When I was done, Raphael leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "All right, Miss Phoenix," he said, a twinkle in his eye. "You've convinced me. Let's talk numbers." He agreed to a significant seed investment, enough to hire a small team, secure proper office space, and launch. Walking out of his office that day, the city air felt different, charged with possibility. My dream, born of pain and defiance, was becoming real. I was celebrating with Ava over takeout pizza that night, the investor agreement signed and sitting on my coffee table, when my phone buzzed. A text from Harlon. "Big family dinner Sunday. Mum's making an announcement. Be there." My stomach clenched. I knew what this was. Edith was ready to make her move. "What is it?" Ava asked, noticing my expression. I showed her the text. "They're going to do it, Ava. They're going to announce their plans for Harlon and her." Ava's eyes hardened. "Let them." Then she grinned, a fierce, proud grin. "They have no idea who they're dealing with, do they?" "No," I thought, a small cold smile playing on my lips. They really didn't. As Edith prepared to formally introduce the woman she hoped would secure the Price legacy, I was securing my own. And it was going to be so much bigger than they could ever imagine. The family foundation role interviews were in full swing. Edith paraded a series of impeccably dressed, eager-looking young women through the house for informal chats. I made myself scarce, using my new office, a small rented space buzzing with the energy of my tiny, hand-picked team, as a sanctuary. While they were vetting potential broodmares, I was vetting server capacities and marketing strategies. One afternoon, while Harlan was at a business lunch, which I suspected involved Scarlett and his parents, I slipped away. Not to my office, but to a quiet, discreet clinic on the other side of town. I'd made the appointment weeks ago, a nagging thought I couldn't shake. All those years, all the subtle and not so subtle blame heaped upon me. I needed to know, for myself. The tests were comprehensive, far more detailed than the cursory checks Harlan and I had undergone years ago, checks he'd always downplayed, assuring me everything was probably fine and that we just needed to relax and let nature take its course. A week later, I sat opposite Dr. Ramirez, a kind-faced woman with gentle eyes. She reviewed my results, a small frown etching her brow. "Well, Taylor," she began, "from everything I see here, you are perfectly healthy. All your levels are excellent. There's absolutely no discernible reason on your end why you wouldn't be able to conceive." A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled me, washed over. It wasn't me. It was never me. Then Dr. Ramirez continued, her tone careful. "Often, when we see a profile like yours, and there's a history of difficulty, we would strongly recommend the male partner undergo a more thorough and specific series of tests. There are certain male infertility factors that are quite common, actually, and sometimes aren't picked up in initial, broader screenings, especially if those screenings were, shall we say, not pursued with particular rigour by the male patient. Her words hung in the air, not pursued with particular rigour. Harlon. He'd always been so dismissive of further testing for himself, always so quick to shift the focus, the unspoken blame, back to me. Could he have known, or suspected, and hidden it? The thought sent a fresh wave of cold fury through me. It wasn't just neglect, it was deception. My incompleteness had been his shield. "Thank you, Doctor," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "You've been very helpful." Armed with this private vindicating knowledge, I threw myself into Phoenix Innovations with renewed ferocity. The launch of our flagship software was met with a surprising flurry of interest. Small and mid-sized logistics companies, tired of being gouged by the industry Goliaths and frustrated with outdated tech, were eager for an alternative. Tech blogs started picking up on us. Phoenix Innovations, the scrappy startup disrupting a billion-dollar industry. My team was ecstatic. We celebrated with cheap champagne and pizza in our cramped office, the energy infectious. "We're actually doing it, Taylor!" Ben, my lead developer, exclaimed, his face flushed with excitement. "We're making waves!" I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. For the first time in years I felt powerful. Not because of a man or a family name, but because of what I was building, brick by digital brick. One morning, scrolling through industry news before heading to the office, a headline caught my eye. "Price Manufacturing faces mounting financial difficulties amidst market disruption. Stock prices tumble." A slow, deliberate smile spread across my face. Price Manufacturing, Alfred's pride and joy, their legacy. It was a dinosaur, and the meteor was my company, Phoenix Innovations, along with other nimble tech startups carving up their outdated market share. It wasn't my primary goal to hurt their business, not initially anyway. My focus was on building mine. But if their dusty, inefficient company became collateral damage in my ascent, I found I didn't mind one bit. In fact, it felt like a small, satisfying taste of poetic justice. The irony was almost too perfect. They were so obsessed with securing their future through an heir, so focused on my perceived failings, that they were completely blind to the real threat looming over their precious legacy. A threat that was, in part, being orchestrated by the very woman they were so eager to discard. They wanted a future for the Price name. I was busy building a future for mine, and it was looking a hell of a lot brighter. The calls from Edith had become less frequent, her tone when she did call more strained. The pressure about an heir was still there, but it was now tinged with a new anxiety, one I recognised as financial fear. Little did they know, the architect of some of their new business woes was sleeping under their roof, silently plotting her next move. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. Phoenix Innovations wasn't just making waves, it was creating a tsunami. Our client base exploded. We secured a second round of funding, this time from a major venture capital firm, at a valuation that made my head spin. We moved into a sleek, modern office space that took up an entire floor of a downtown high-rise. Raphael Meyer, now a board member and a genuine mentor, would often stop by, a proud grin on his face. "You're a rocket ship, Taylor," he'd said during our last meeting. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." I certainly wasn't. I'd quietly, meticulously moved my personal assets, the ones I'd brought into the marriage and the rapidly accumulating profits from Phoenix, into accounts solely in my name. I consulted a sharp, no-nonsense divorce attorney Ava recommended, just to understand my options, I'd told her, though we both knew it was more than that. I was preparing my exit strategy. The contrast between my two lives was starker than ever. At Phoenix I was decisive, respected, in command. At the Price House, which I still returned to most nights out of a grim sense of obligation and a desire to see this through on my terms, I was the quiet, disappointing wife. The irony was a constant, bitter companion. The news about Price Manufacturing went from bad to worse. Their stock was in freefall. Rumours of layoffs and potential bankruptcy were rife. Alfred looked greyer, more stooped every time I saw him. Edith's carefully maintained composure was cracking, her pronouncements about legacy now laced with a desperate edge. Even Harlon, usually so adept at maintaining a facade of breezy confidence, seemed perpetually stressed, his temper shorter. They were so consumed by their own imploding world and their relentless, misguided quest for an heir that they remained blissfully, arrogantly unaware of my meteoric rise. They didn't read tech blogs, they didn't follow venture capital news. Their world was insular, built on old money and outdated notions of importance. Then the summons came. An email from Edith, CCing Alfred and Harlon. Subject: Urgent family meeting, the future. Taylor, it read, we need to convene as a family to discuss important matters regarding the future. Your presence is required. Sunday, 2 p.m. at the house. Please be prompt. This was it. The moment they would formally, finally, try to cast me aside. I imagined they'd already picked out the china pattern with scarlet. A strange calmness settled over me. There was no fear, no panic, just a cold, clear sense of purpose. I spent the next few days preparing, not just mentally, but practically. I gathered my documents, Phoenix Innovations Incorporation papers, our latest valuation reports, press clippings, bank statements, and of course Dr. Ramirez's letter, tucked securely in a separate envelope. My presentation was ready. It wasn't just about my business, it was about their reckoning. The day before the meeting, Ava came over to my new apartment, a bright, airy place I'd leased under my own name, my sanctuary and future home. I hadn't told Harlan or his family about it yet. "Are you ready for this?" Ava asked, her eyes searching mine. We were sitting on my balcony overlooking the city. I took a sip of wine. As I'll ever be. I showed her the folder with my documents. They think they're going to deliver my eulogy. They have no idea I'm about to read theirs. Ava grinned. "Go get 'em, Taylor. Burn it all down. Metaphorically speaking, of course." She winked. "Mostly." Her unwavering support had been my lifeline. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Ava." "Nonsense," she said, waving a dismissive hand, though her eyes were suspiciously bright. "You had this fire in you all along. They just tried too hard to put it out, and it exploded." That night, as I lay in the sterile guest room of the Price House, I'd long since stopped sharing a bed with Harlan, citing his snoring as an excuse he readily accepted. My phone buzzed. A text from Harlan. "Mum expects you to be agreeable tomorrow, Taylor, for everyone's sake. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stared at the message, a humourless smile touching my lips. Agreeable. Oh, I would be, just not in the way he imagined. I typed back a simple reply. "Oh, I will be, more agreeable than you can imagine." I pictured his confused frown, then Edith's smug satisfaction as he showed her my message. Let them think they had me cowed. Let them walk into that room tomorrow, puffed up with their self-importance and their cruel intentions. The storm was coming, and I was the goddamn hurricane. The air in the formal living room was thick with unspoken words and the scent of Edith's expensive, cloying perfume. Alfred sat stiffly in his usual armchair, looking like a man about to pass a kidney stone. Harland fidgeted beside him on the sofa, refusing to meet my eye. Edith, however, was in her element, perched on the edge of a brocade chair, a look of solemn, almost regal authority on her face. I sat opposite them, a slim leather portfolio resting on my lap, feeling a strange icy calm. "Taylor, dear," Edith began, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "we've asked you here today because, well, some things need to be addressed, for the good of the family." I inclined my head slightly. "Oh? As you know," she continued, warming to her theme, "a family, particularly a family like ours, with its history and its responsibilities, requires certain things. Stability, continuity." She paused, her gaze flicking towards Harlan, then back to me. "And, regrettably, It has become clear that your marriage to Harlan, while perhaps entered into with the best of intentions, has not borne fruit. Alfred cleared his throat. Simply put, Taylor, the lineage needs to be secured. It's a practical matter. Harlan finally spoke, his voice low, still not looking at me. It's just not working, Taylor. We've tried. It's nobody's fault, but it is rather your inadequacy, dear, isn't it? Edith cut in smoothly, her eyes glinting. Your inability to provide Harlan with an heir. It's a sad truth, but one we must face. Therefore, it's time for Harlan to fulfill his destiny, to secure the Price name for future generations. She took a breath, clearly building to her grand announcement. This was it, the moment they'd officially declare me redundant. And so, Edith said, a triumphant little smile playing on her lips, we have decided as a family that it is best for Harlan to— Actually, I interrupted, my voice clear and steady, cutting through her pronouncement. All three of them stared at me, surprised by the interruption. Before you continue, Edith, I have a few things I'd like to share. Edith's smile faltered. Taylor, this really isn't the time for— Oh, I think it's the perfect time, I said, opening my portfolio. I pulled out a single sealed envelope and placed it on the coffee table. Let's start with the matter of inadequacy and bearing fruit, shall we? I looked directly at Harlan. His eyes finally met mine, a flicker of unease in their depths. For years, I've been made to feel like a failure. Incomplete, I believe, was your mother's preferred term. But I recently underwent comprehensive fertility testing, Harlan, on my own. A stunned silence filled the room. Edith's mouth opened, then closed. And the results? I continued, my voice unwavering. I am perfectly healthy, more than capable of conceiving. I paused, letting that sink in. The specialist, however, strongly suggested that if there is an issue, it most likely lies with the male partner. She mentioned certain common male infertility factors that previous, more cursory checks you always downplayed, Harlan, might have missed. Or perhaps checks whose results you chose to conceal. Harlan went pale, a ghostly white. He looked like he'd been punched. Alfred stared, dumbfounded. Edith's face was a mask of disbelief. Conceal? She finally sputtered. Harlan, is this true? Harlan stammered. I don't— That's ridiculous. But his eyes darted away, guilt written all over his face. Is it, Harlan? I pressed. Or is it just easier to let your wife take the blame for years? Before they could recover, I pulled out the next set of documents. Now, let's talk about legacy and the future of the family name. I spread the glossy brochures and financial reports for Phoenix Innovations across the coffee table. This is my company, Phoenix Innovations, a tech startup I founded and built from the ground up while you were all so busy critiquing my womb. Their eyes widened as they took in the impressive figures, the glowing press. Phoenix Innovations, I stated, is currently valued at over $200 million. It's recognized as a major disruptive force in the logistics technology sector. A sector, I might add, where price manufacturing is currently struggling. I let my gaze drift to Alfred, whose face had gone ashen. In fact, Phoenix is in advanced talks to acquire one of Price Manufacturing's key competitors, an acquisition which, I'm told, will likely seal your company's financial doom. The silence in the room was absolute, thick with shock and dawning horror. You wanted an heir to secure your dusty lineage, I said, my voice cold. Instead, you bred deceit and cultivated cruelty. I stood up, placing a final document on the table, the divorce papers my lawyer had prepared. I've filed for divorce, Harlan. I'm taking nothing from you, nothing from this family, except my own dignity and my own very successful enterprise. I looked Edith dead in the eye. The regal composure had shattered, replaced by a look of utter devastation. You called me incomplete. Turns out the only thing incomplete here was your son's honesty and your family's decency. Enjoy your crumbling legacy. And with that, I turned and walked out of the room. out of the house, out of their lives, leaving them in the stunned, devastated silence of their own making. The click of the front door closing behind me was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. The city skyline stretched out before me, a glittering tapestry of lights against the deepening twilight. I leaned against the cool glass of my office window, the hum of Phoenix Innovations, my Phoenix Innovations, a comforting thrum beneath my feet. It had been a whirlwind few weeks since that final explosive confrontation in the Price living room. The news, as news tends to do in circles like theirs, had spread like wildfire. First, the whispers about the impending divorce, then the louder, more scandalous details. Harland's concealed infertility, my secret tech empire, the spectacular implosion of Price manufacturing, accelerated by my company's strategic acquisition of their competitor. It was the kind of salacious gossip that fueled dinner parties for months. Their social ruin was as swift as their financial one. Ava swirled the wine in her glass, a satisfied smile on her face. She'd insisted on a victory celebration in my new office. "So," she said, "heard from the condemned lately?" I chuckled, a dry, humourless sound. Harlon called, yesterday. Ava raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what pearls of wisdom did he impart?" "The usual," I said, turning from the window. A pathetic attempt at an apology. Said he was under a lot of pressure, that he never meant for things to go this far. Blamed his mother mostly. "Of course he did," Ava scoffed, spineless to the end. "I told him his apologies were about as valuable as his family's stock options right now," I replied, taking a sip of my own wine. Then I hung up. "Good," Ava said firmly. "He doesn't deserve your breath, let alone your forgiveness." She was right. The pain they'd inflicted, the years of quiet degradation had left scars. I wasn't naive enough to think they'd vanish overnight, but the revenge, it had been undeniably sweet. Watching their carefully constructed world of arrogance and entitlement crumble under the weight of their own actions. It was a catharsis I wouldn't trade. They got exactly what they deserved. Edith and Alfred, from what I heard through the grapevine, were broken. Their legacy, the thing they'd prized above all else, was now a cautionary tale. Their name, once a symbol of old money respectability, was now synonymous with deceit and failure. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed on the sleek mahogany desk, a notification from a financial news app. Phoenix Innovations CEO Taylor M announces record Q3 earnings, expansion into European market. I smiled. Taylor M, not Taylor Price, just Taylor, my name. "To Taylor M," Ava said, raising her glass, "the woman who built her own damn castle and then salted the earth of her enemies." I clinked my glass against hers. I prefer to think of it as aggressive urban renewal. We laughed, a genuine light-hearted sound that echoed in the spacious office. The emotional toll had been real, the journey exhausting. There were days I'd wanted to give up, to just walk away. But the thought of their smug faces, their casual cruelty, had always fueled me. "You know," Ava said, her expression turning more serious, "what they did to you. It was monstrous, the pressure they put on you, making you feel like you were less than human because you weren't producing an heir for their ridiculous dynasty." "They underestimated me," I said simply. "They saw a quiet wife, someone they could mould and discard. They never bothered to look deeper." "Their loss," Ava said, "and the world's gain. Look at what you've built, Taylor. You're an inspiration." I looked around my office, at the bustling open-plan workspace visible through the glass walls, at the city lights stretching to the horizon. I had built this. Not for them, not in spite of them ultimately, but for me, see. Because I was capable, because I had a vision. Their cruelty had been the catalyst, the spark that ignited the fire, but the fuel, the drive, the intellect that had always been mine. The final divorce papers had arrived last week. Clean, quick, uncontested. Harland hadn't dared to fight for a single penny. He knew he had no leverage. I'd walked away with what was mine and what I had created. A A small, satisfied smile touched my lips. I was free, I was powerful, and I was finally completely and utterly whole, on my own terms. They wanted an heir to secure their name, I mused, looking back out at the city. Instead, their name is now synonymous with their downfall. I paused, the weight of the thought settling in, not with bitterness, but with a sense of profound, quiet triumph. And my name? Everyone knows my name now.